Once upon a time, in a magnificent kingdom nestled in the heart of Africa, there lived a king who ruled with an iron fist. His kingdom was vast and prosperous, and his word was law. The king had one precious daughter, a princess who was the jewel of the land. She was known not only for her beauty but for her wisdom and grace. Every prince and nobleman in the kingdom dreamt of marrying her. Yet, despite all the attention, the princess was unhappy, for she longed for something more than the grand walls of the palace and the jewels that decorated her every day. But there was a problem. She was a princess, and she had been raised to believe that love could never come from someone beneath her. The royal bloodline was sacred, and she had been taught that only another royal or someone of high status could be worthy of her affections. The kingdom, filled with its strict customs and rules, would never allow it. To fall in love with a commoner, a servant, or anyone not of noble birth would bring shame and ruin upon the royal family. It was a rule that could never be broken. Yet, love has a strange way of finding its path when least expected. But this love, as beautiful as it was, could never be accepted. It was forbidden. It was impossible. And yet, the two began a secret connection, one that would ultimately challenge everything the kingdom stood for. One fateful evening, as the sun bathed the royal gardens in a warm golden hue, Princess Ammara sought refuge from the weight of her royal duties. The day had been relentless, filled with endless expectations, and she longed for a moment of solitude. Wandering through the fragrant pathways, her thoughts clouded by the pressures of her station, she was surprised by the rhythmic sound of a hammer striking wood. Interested, she followed the noise to a secluded corner near the palace walls. There, under the shadow of an ancient tree, stood a man unlike any she had encountered. His clothes were plain and functional, marking him as a laborer, yet his presence was compelling. His name was Kofi. Focused on repairing a broken bench, he worked with a quiet precision that reflected his steady character. The golden light caught his eyes, revealing an unexpected depth. He was no mere servant. There was a calm determination about him that drew her in. Ammara approached, her steps cautious but curious. "Excuse me," she said softly, surprising even herself. "What are you doing?" Kofi glanced up, momentarily startled, then bowed his head respectfully. "I'm repairing the bench, Your Highness." His voice was steady, humble yet unshaken, a refreshing contrast to the constant flattery she suffered. For the first time, someone looked at her not as a princess, but as a person. Undiscovered to both of them, this was just the beginning of something neither could have predicted, an encounter that would challenge everything they had been taught about love, status, and destiny. As weeks passed, Ammara found herself returning to the garden time and time again, drawn to the secluded corner where she had first met Kofi. At first, she told herself it was the peace of the garden that pulled her back, but deep down, she knew it was him. Each encounter left her more interested, her heart seeking the calm his presence brought. The quiet dedication in his work, the precision in his movements, and the unspoken dignity he carried despite his humble station. Kofi spoke carefully, but when he did, his words carried a depth that lingered with her long after she left. One afternoon, as she approached, Kofi looked up and met her gaze. This time, instead of stopping his eyes, he gave her a small, genuine smile, a gesture that sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. "You come here often," he said one day, his voice steady but tinged with curiosity. "I suppose I do," Ammara replied softly. "It's the only place I can truly be myself, away from the weight of expectations." Kofi nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "Everyone needs a place to feel free. For me, this garden is one of those places." In his presence, the heaviness of her royal obligations seemed to lift. Here, she wasn't a princess burdened by a crown. She was simply Ammara. Their conversations, though brief, carried an unspoken understanding that deepened their bond. And slowly, her curiosity transformed into something she couldn't deny. She was falling for him. Yet in the back of her mind, doubts lingered. Could a connection like theirs survive the barriers of status and duty? But with every shared moment, those boundaries seemed to dissolve. In the quiet of the garden, They were just two souls finding relief in each other, the world outside their secret haven fading into irrelevance. As Ammara and Kofi's bond grew stronger, and they into love with other, but the weight of their secret began to suffocate them. What started as simple conversations and stolen moments of laughter had transformed into something undeniable, something they could no longer ignore. But the reality of their circumstances loomed over them like a dark cloud. The garden, their reserve, now felt like a fragile bubble that could burst at any moment under the pressures of the palace. For Ammara, the time away from Kofi became unbearable. Every royal duty felt hollow, every grand hall and decorative gown a stark reminder of the gulf between their worlds. Yet, she couldn't bring herself to let go of the connection that made her feel alive. Kofi wasn't just a servant in her eyes. He was her confidant, her anchor in a world dictated by appearances and duty. But with each passing day, she felt the walls of her royal life closing in, forcing her to face the impossibility of their love. One evening, as she walked through the palace corridors, her mother, Queen Saud, stopped her. The queen's sharp gaze pierced through Ammara, her expression calm but filled with an unmistakable weight. "You've been spending much time in the gardens," the queen began, her tone measured but touched with suspicion. "And I've noticed a particular man, someone who doesn't belong." Ammara froze, her heart pounding. She struggled to maintain composure as she replied, "He's just a servant, mother. He works in the gardens." The queen's sharp eyes narrowed. "Is that all, Ammara?" For a moment, Ammara hesitated, but she couldn't lie to her mother's unyielding gaze. "I've grown fond of him," she admitted quietly. "He's kind, honest, and he sees me for who I truly am." The queen's expression hardened. "You are a princess," she said firmly. "Your duty is to this kingdom, to your family. You cannot let emotions dictate your actions. This connection will only lead to ruin." Ammara's voice rose, a mix of frustration and despair. "Why must I sacrifice everything for the kingdom? Why can't I have something for myself?" Queen Sauda's tone turned cold, her words like ice. "Because that is the burden of royalty. You were born to marry for power, for alliances, not for love." Ammara's chest tightened as her mother's words struck deep. The love she felt for Kofi, so pure and untainted, now seemed like an impossible dream. She felt trapped, torn between her heart and her duty. Meanwhile, Kofi remained unaware of the storm brewing within the palace walls. He continued his work in the gardens, his thoughts often drifting to Ammara. She had become a light in his world, someone who saw beyond his station, beyond the dirt on his hands. Yet he knew the risks of his feelings. He was just a servant and she was a princess. The divide between them was immense, but his heart clung to the hope that their connection could overcome it. As the tension within the palace grew, so did the uncertainty surrounding their future. Their bond, though strong, now faced the harsh realities of a world ruled by status and duty, where love alone might not be enough. As Ammara and Kofi's bond deepened, the weight of their secret grew unbearable. What had started as innocent meetings in the garden, filled with genuine conversation, quickly transformed into something neither could ignore. Ammara, once dutiful and reserved, began to feel a growing pull toward Kofi that challenged the very rules she had been taught to uphold. He made her feel seen, not as a princess but as a woman, and she found herself craving his presence more and more. But the truth was impossible to escape. She was a princess and he was a servant. Her heart longed for him, but society and her royal status demanded that she keep her distance. One day, as Ammara wandered the palace halls, her mother, Queen Saud, confronted her. Her sharp eyes had noticed her frequent visits to the garden and had seen the connection between Ammara and Kofi. "You must understand, dear," the queen said coldly. "You are the future of this kingdom. Marrying beneath your station could ruin everything your father and I have built." Ammara's heart sank. Her secret was out, and the reality of their love, impossible, forbidden, hit her with full force. torn between duty and desire. She realized that the love she had found with Kofi could never be dot, and the rumors reached inside the palace reached a king's ears, and king then called to her daughter Ammara. As Ammara stood in the grand hall, her heart heavy with the weight of forbidden love, she was summoned to the royal court. The whispers that had followed her in secret now echoed loudly, threatening to expose everything. Walking with purpose but vibrating inside, she approached her father, King Osei, who stood at the center of the court, his expression a mixture of anger and disappointment. "Ammara," King Osei began, his voice harsh, "is it true what I have heard? That you have forsaken your royal blood for a servant?" Ammara's chest tightened, but she refused to falter. "It is true, father. I love him. Kofi is not just a servant but a man of integrity, courage, and kindness." The king's face darkened with fury. "You have brought dishonor to this family. Love is a luxury we cannot afford. Your duty is to this kingdom." Before he could continue, the court doors opened, and Kofi walked in. The guards moved to block him, but he stood firm, his voice steady. "Your Majesty, I do not come here to confront you but to stand by the woman I love. I may be a servant, but I have earned my place through my actions and my honor. I seek not to weaken your rule but to prove my worth." The court erupted in whispers, and King Osei raised his hand for silence. His piercing gaze rested on Kofi. "Prove your worth. Love alone does not make a leader." The king's voice turned thoughtful. "If you wish to marry my daughter, you must demonstrate strength and wisdom, not just to me but to this kingdom. There is unrest in the northern borders. Lead an voyage to restore peace. If you succeed, you will earn not just my blessing, but the respect of my people." Kofi bowed deeply. "I accept, Your Majesty." Over the next months, Kofi's journey tested him beyond anything he had ever suffered. He negotiated with aggressive tribes, calmed tensions among soldiers, and navigated unfaithful landscapes. His leadership was marked by humility, listening to all sides, and earning trust through action. Through it all, Ammara's letters of encouragement sustained him, reminding him of the love that waited for him. When Kofi returned victorious, the court erupted in celebration. King Osei, though reluctant at first, now looked upon Kofi with pride. "You have shown the heart of a true leader," the king declared. "Ammara, you have chosen wisely." With the king's blessing, Ammara and Kofi stood together, their love no longer hidden but celebrated. Their journey had transformed them both, uniting them not only in love but in a shared vision for the kingdom's future. Together they would rule as equals, proving that love, when tested and true, could bridge even the widest of divides. As the story of Ammara and Kofi comes to an end, it leaves behind a powerful message for all who hear it. The tale is not just about love, but about the strength of character and the importance of overcoming challenges. True love, as we see through Kofi's journey, is not just a feeling. It is something that requires sacrifice, resilience, and the ability to grow. Kofi's willingness to face the king's demanding trial for the sake of his love for Ammara shows that love is more than mere affection. It is about proving oneself worthy of the bond and ensuring that both parties are ready to build a future together. Moreover, the story speaks to the value of inner strength over outward appearances. Despite Kofi's humble beginnings, he proved that a person's worth is not defined by their status or wealth, but by their actions, their ability to lead, and the courage to face adversity. In contrast, King Osei's initially rigid stance reminds us that even those in power must consider what truly matters in a relationship: trust, loyalty, and shared values.